I'm really, really excited about today. I've been working with Cam for many, many months on this, and we were really planning this day to be much bigger, much better than last year and what we did. Even though last year was awesome, we did want to do it bigger and better, and it's always hard to envision when you're planning these things beforehand. It's always very hard to know if the bigger and better is going to translate on the day, but I feel like we've done a pretty good job, so I'm really, really proud. And thank you to Cam. I'm very, very excited to welcome to the stage my panelists for this talk. We're doing a panel discussion on analysing the successes and fails of testing AI. So please welcome to the stage Mark from Canva, Robbie from Navigi, and Rajesh from QA Assure. Just to kick us off, guys, can each of you just go through and introduce yourselves and maybe a bit of the experience you guys have had around testing AI?
Yeah, I can go first. So I've been in testing about almost 20 years this year. Started off in kind of engineering and telecom space, and that kind of led me to testing devices, and it all then eventually led to me working in Amazon, working on the Alexa product. So I worked there for 6 years, basically built the Alexa team here in Australia, and Alexa, as you know, it consists of a bunch of different AI and machine learning models. So yeah, that's kind of where I came from and how I end up talking about it.
Awesome. Raj?
Yeah, hi guys. Thanks Lisa for the introduction. And by the way, it's not a QA Assure, it's Assure QA.
Oh my bad.
That's all right, all good. We just had lunch, so probably just waking up. My name is Rajesh. I've been in the testing industry for about 20 odd years. I work as a product owner at Azure QA, which is a test automation platform. Really looking forward to this AI change that is happening in our industry. Been doing manual testing, automated testing, but what AI is bringing to the whole testing world is completely innovative. As we all know, ChatGPTs and a lot of acronyms out there. But yeah, really looking forward to learning from this conference as well.
So I'm Mark. I've been in the industry for something like 20 years. I currently work at a company called Canva, which is online design platform based here in Sydney. And over the last couple of years, we've really been building a lot of features powered by ML models and different types of features, generating text, generating images, processing images, chatbots, search, and they all have their different challenges, and we've learned a lot over the past couple of years testing them.
Amazing. We're going to talk about a few different areas in this talk today, guys, but we're going to kick off with basically what have we seen, sort of the generalised fails and successes. So we get kind of bombarded by news headlines. You can see literally just a few that I grabbed from online, but from your perspectives, what are some significant successes or fails you guys have seen in the industry when it comes to AI? Robbie, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, so I guess obviously Alexa is a good story because I tested it well, and I still think it's a good product. So and I think like ChatGPT has come a long way since it first started. Very happy with the experience of GPT-4, yeah, I think what else was I going to say? There was another one around GitHub Copilot as well. It's been really good as well. I think so on some of the kind of fails, I think in general, some of the chatbots, the way you try and talk to them and then they eventually default back to a human operator. I think that's happened to me quite a few times recently.
Yeah.
They've given it a good go. But eventually I've asked the type of question where it just says, okay, I'm handing you back over to a human. So I think they can get better.
Yeah, true. Raj?
I think from my perspective, most of my experience has been in the HR and finance space. And I'll just talk to what I've seen in the HR space. A lot of companies are now implementing ERPs which have got AI assist. I guess we've all seen the good side of ChatGPT, but especially when you bring it into a configured LLM inside your organization, obviously you can't look at some of the ChatGPTs which is external. So some of the things that could go wrong is, especially in the recruitment industry, when you're trying to put a job spec out there and if you've not moderated your content. So I've seen some real hiccups there, and that's something that we are really working towards. Not in an automated fashion yet, but early days. We're still doing the manual. So yeah.
And Mark?
I think the most successful applications of AI are often where it's transparent to the end user. They don't know that they're using AI, and it's valuable for the business. So, for example, the classic example is shopping, where if you're predicting what the user is looking for and giving them the right results faster, then maybe you get your revenue up by 0.5% or 1%, and that's huge. And the user doesn't even know that they're doing it, because often users are skeptical or hostile to AI in the first place. In terms of failures, the one that stands out to me, I think it's up on the screen, is the airline chatbot, which a user asked it for the policy that the airline had. It hallucinated something and told them incorrect information, and then the airline was held responsible for the consequences of that communication, which seems fairly reasonable. But the reason why I think that's interesting is because it's a case of the business actually having a dollar cost to the failure of the AI. And that's something we might see more and more. When we get it wrong, the business suffers and there's a monetary penalty.
Yeah, it was a massive story. I think everyone heard of the Air Canada blunder, didn't they?
I wasn't going to say the name of the company.
Whoopsies. Hopefully no one from Air Canada here today. Awesome. And when it comes to these successes and failures, do you have any comments around how you think that some of these big stories, these big headlines, have shaped the way we are approaching AI testing today?
I think I could probably take some of that, especially the cost of lost opportunity. Like Mark was saying, if it's anything going out there in the public, that's going to cost. There's a lot of opportunity cost that's being lost. When it's internal, you could still manage it, I guess. So because we work in an internal system, we've seen that, and you can do an internal pilot. But especially when it's going out there, you got to be so careful. You got to validate every word that goes out, because people are so used to ChatGPT. If you don't know something, just go and ask ChatGPT. But when it comes to internal, it's slightly different.
Yeah, I think these stories are good because they raise awareness of the risks that exist, and we can't necessarily prevent every bad case from happening. We can't address all of the risks, but being aware of them is the first step. And it becomes a business decision. Do you invest money into trying to prevent that risk, or do you just accept that it exists and move forward with it?
Yeah, and I'd probably say there's probably a gap right now in terms of, up to now, a lot of companies have been experimenting with LLMs and AI and stuff, and this year they're productionizing them and actually releasing them to potentially millions of users, and the evaluation methods that they've used in the experiments don't kind of translate to a production environment where they have to have more rigorous protocols around QA and testing as well. So I think that's something that people are starting to realize as well. Once they see some of these risks up here as well, they realize that maybe they need to have a more rigorous kind of testing around AI.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. Great points, guys. We're going to just dive into now. It was a very good segue, I thought, we're just going to have a quick look at, I guess, the state of testing AI right now. And I'm curious to know from you guys, in terms of how would you describe the current state of AI testing, and further to that, what particular changes have you noticed recently? Mark, did you want to kick us off with that one?
Sure. So there are obviously a lot of differences between testing deterministic and non-deterministic features, But at a high level, there's a lot of similarities as well. And often the approach is that you identify the risks that exist, as I said. Like if you know what the risks are, you can come up with strategies to address them. You execute test cases, you give inputs and look at the outputs and make a judgment on whether it's good or bad, and obviously automate that as much as possible. And I think a key point is being aware of what's happening in production, have the right mechanisms in place so that if something is going wrong, you find out about it and you can fix it as fast as possible rather than letting it persist. In terms of what's changed recently, I think there's been an explosion in tools and services that are promising to solve all of your problems. And one of the biggest challenges for me in the industry is to figure out which of those actually have value and do solve problems, and which ones are really just using AI as a buzzword and it's marketing puffery.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, I think like you said, there's a lot of tools out there, and we're not sure which tool, and not one size fits all kind of an approach. So we've piloted a lot of tools to do comparisons, to look for keywords, and like I said, we look at it more from an internal corporate standpoint as opposed to what's out there. So I think even I guess as we speak, even the methodologies are getting written. So there's no real framework out there which we can use. Probably we need to ask ChatGPT. Look, is there a framework out there? Which I shouldn't lie, I've tried a few times, but it doesn't really work in a corporate sense.
Yeah.
So it's still, I would say, early days. We're all learning. I mean, if anyone hand on heart and said, yes, I know everything in AI testing, that needs to be validated.
For sure. Robbie? In terms of, how would you describe the current state of testing and, the changes that you've noticed just recently?
Well, the technology is constantly changing as well. So like what you were using to test like a year ago is different now. Like back then you may have had like fine tuning an LLM model, and there's various techniques around that and evaluation metrics. Now you're looking at things like RAG, retrieval augmented generation, which is getting you're providing the data, and then it's augmenting the prompt with that data and then sending it to the LLM. And so there's a whole different way of testing that as well. Like you've got to make sure that the data that you provide in your RAG system is up to scratch. Like if you pass it bad data, then already it's not going to work. So that kind of changes things a bit. But it does give you, it's easier to do in a way, I think, certainly than fine tuning. But you need to do it right, and you need to have a good structure in place in terms of your test strategy to make sure that you're able to have good quality in your RAG. And maybe next year there's going to be different stuff as well. Like it's constantly changing.
That's true. I think when we were looking at putting the general AI terminology up here that we were planning on using in our talk, it was definitely a tough one. There were a lot of suggestions, and you kind of try to condense into just the most important ones, I guess, or which ones are going to be most relevant for the crowd and what we're talking about. But nice. That was also a very good segue into the next part that we're going to talk about, which is probably going to be where we spend the most of the time, and it's around best practices and techniques. So in terms of, just a question for all of you guys, just to kick us off, what would you say some of the common issues or challenges you've seen people facing when it comes to testing AI features? Raj, did you want to kick us off?
I think I'll approach that question in a slightly different way. Again, looking at some of those real buzzwords, and different industries can have different buzzwords. What's probably right to you might not be right to me. So it's probably looking at the culture of that organization in terms of what they've been using in the past, and learning from that. And yes, there's a lot of data held within the organization, and perhaps learning some of that and then bringing that into your test strategy, I would think would be one of the approaches. And there's multiple ways to skin a cat, but I guess we just need to look at, especially, I'm talking about, the couple of use cases that we are involved with right now, which is in the recruitment space and also in the performance appraisal space, which takes a lot of time of the employees and the managers, which I'll probably get to you in a bit, just to explain, the pains that we are going through, I guess.
Yeah, nice. What are some challenges you've seen, Mark?
To some extent, testing AI or ML-driven feature is kind of the easy bit. Like, you give it your input, you look at the response, and you make a human judgment. Is that correct? Is that not? Like, anyone, well, not anyone, but it's not a difficult problem to solve. And if it's your full-time job, you do it multiple times a day, and it's not very interesting. I think the challenge is how to scale that up, how to, instead of doing 30 prompts, you want to do 30,000 prompts or 1 million prompts. So finding ways of making that human judgment scalable, either through a mechanical Turk type system or through sensible automation or using AI, testing AI. There's different ways of doing it, but ultimately, in my company at least, the goal is that we want the developers to be iterating as fast as possible and changing the model with confidence. And one way of doing that is to have the tooling in place so that every time they make a change, they have the confidence coming back that the change has not made things worse.
Nice. Robbie?
Yeah, I'll add to that as well, like things like defect management as well. Like, you don't want to go too heavy on defect management and raise a bug and have to, go onto Jira and like raise a bug for every single issue. You want to find, like, are there patterns that I can see that are happening, and then maybe bunch in like 1,000 issues that you might see into one kind of master issue. I think from my previous experience, defect management has been a challenge because you have to, if you're training a model and you find some pattern or some issue, then you have to fine tune or retrain a model, which might take a few weeks or might take a month, or there could be a particular cadence that the ML scientists have for training their model. So then you have to wait, and your Jira is just open until it gets fixed. And then when it gets fixed, like what I mean by that is the model has been retrained, and statistically it's fixed, but then you go back and you see that it's still not working. And then I think there's a difference in the way a ML scientist sees things and a QA engineer sees things. They go on like, okay, it works 90% of the time, like it passes an evaluation metric, whereas you're like, it either works or it doesn't. And so just understanding like those different things is a challenge in itself.
Yeah.
And then just the release cycles as well is a challenge in itself. But I think just communication and being open to new ideas and innovating in this domain will help with that.
For sure.
Yeah, to add to that, I think the bug is the wrong unit. It's the wrong level of detail for this type of activity, and sometimes QAs have that blind spot where things either work or they don't work. So in an algorithm, a single prompt giving a wrong answer, like, no one really cares. It's not really a bug. The question is whether the algorithm as a whole is doing a good job or doing a bad job, and that's something that's much more difficult to measure.
Yeah, and well, another point then as well is around like what they call responsible AI as well. And in that case, you might find a really small bug, but it could have a massive impact because it could like damage the reputation of the brand of the company that is developing this machine learning or LLM or generative AI product. So I can't think of an example off the top of my head, but if a chatbot, you ask it a particular question and it gives you some, completely, like, I'm not even going to think about what, like a really
Unacceptable.
a very unacceptable response, and then someone just puts it up on Twitter or X or whatever, and then that company then gets on the front of CNN or something like that. That's completely brand damaging, but it's one little bug as well. So that whole area of responsible AI is super important as well.
Yeah.
And so you have to treat that separately in a kind of different way.
And then I guess it also depends on the prompt because the prompt that Robbie gives and the prompt that I give and the prompt that Mark perhaps gives is all different. But maybe kind of trying to achieve the same outcome. But if our prompts are very different, who's there to determine what's the right answer? And where do you fix it? Do you fix it in the RAG? Do you fix it in LLM? Or in your Vertex database? Or who knows? It's that time. I guess it's that period where there's a lot of R&D happening. I guess, yeah.
For sure, we're at a point in time, I feel like, where there's just, even though we've kind of had a lot of these technologies or some version of these technologies around for quite some time, I mean, we're really just at the beginning of what we can utilise them for and what we understand about their capabilities. So it's just a really interesting point in time. I think there's just so much learning to do. But yeah, a lot of challenges there, guys. Really good points. Just by quick question for the audience now, just by a show of hands, how many of you here today are currently involved in building AI features? Okay. Quite a few from this side of the room, not so many on this side of the room. I don't know how that happened, but statistics are magical, aren't they? And out of you guys who are involved in building AI features, how many of you encounter challenges frequently? Yeah, I'm seeing a few hands as well. Awesome. Nice.
And I guess if maybe one more question, if I may. How many of you are involved in testing the AI outcomes? There you go. Okay, there's one there. I'll be really keen to talk to you guys as well, because at the moment, we are brainstorming to find out what are the different techniques, what are the different approaches, and things like that, and we are learning. And there's not one thing that is right. There could be so many different ways to do it. So, really looking forward to talking to you guys to see, whether we're doing the right thing. Is that acceptable approach, and so on. Nice.
Just to throw out another question, I'm going to start sort of quizzing you guys one-on-one now. Robbie, I know this is a pretty broad question, but in terms of your own experience, can you talk a little bit about what you've experienced when it comes to testing AI? I know you touched on it a little earlier, but a little bit more in depth around what you've actually seen in your career.
Without kind of going too much into the nuts and bolts of what I specifically did in my previous role, I think the thing to maybe first of all think about is that when I tested AI, I was testing it in this massive company, okay? And these big companies have these resources to be able to do things like labeling, machine learning labeling, where reinforcement learning from human feedback. These things that require like human input can be very expensive, and only some of the big companies out there can do that. And I guess my experience has been like with those type of companies, you have a lot of support in that way. If you find an issue or a certain trend, let's say for speech recognition, some things may not be understood in, let's say, in Australian English language, where a lot of words are abbreviated, for example. You've got to get training data then to fix that.
Yeah.
And I've been in situations where there's no training data, and you basically just have to wait until more people say that word, and then that data gets labeled, and then eventually it works. So, I mean, they have been very interesting areas to work in, but it's quite different if you're a product, if you're creating a product. If and when I get involved in testing some sort of product that maybe a company has built their own AI, it will be different. As I said, like things will move on very fast, but you're going to be checking things like in different ways that are more optimal and are not as expensive.
Yeah.
You're probably going to be using AI to test AI as well. And there are techniques out there in the, like all the techniques are kind of from the science world, but kind of, they'll all shift. Like in QA, you'll have some sort of, QA AI type of testing that, and tools around that will start coming in. like in the next couple of years, and I think they'll really help. But just going back to what I was, my experience was, having to wait until the next model is, is deployed and waiting around and having the challenges with defect management and stuff like that. I think that was my experience. It'll be quite different in the future. As I said, things move on a lot more.
For sure. So you're saying there's sort of more of the future could hold more of a scientific approach, I guess, to testing AI?
Well, I think it would have more of a QA approach. I think bringing the two worlds together, I think, is very important. So you have like the, evaluation, model evaluations and all that stuff, and then you have like the very rigorous kind of QA processes, maybe meeting in the middle, and there might be some new term for it, like QA AI engineer or something like that. I think that's what it's going to be like in the future, because I think those two worlds definitely need to talk to each other.
Yeah, for sure. That makes sense. And Raj, I've got a question for you, and it's around best practices. What would you consider some essential best practices for people when it comes to testing AI features?
I guess, yes, when it comes to AI features in particular, of course, there's a lot of content that we can validate, but, I'll go back to basics of, testing, which is, looking at the requirement, looking at all the different, use cases with the requirement, looking at some of the positives and the negatives, especially the negatives. So you have a basic flow and then you have the alternate flow. So I'll go back to the good old fashioned of testing when we all started, testing with that whole methodology and framework. So I'll apply the same thing with, and which I've been doing, and I've had varied levels of success. So I'll just use that as my building block, because there's no methodology out there you could just download off the internet and use. You just have to apply it based on that that context. So the one that we were testing is for for auto script healing, where we did a fair bit of AI, and yeah, so like Robbie suggested, we didn't have loads and loads of people to do it. We had half a dozen QA engineers who were doing it manual, and then we were converting those to automated. I guess build an approach from that.
Nice.
So maybe next year this time I'll probably have a more mature framework, which I don't have right now.
Maybe you will have that methodology for people to download from the internet.
You can do a talk.
But again, look, technology is changing so rapidly. So what you know today is kind of history tomorrow.
Yeah.
But then these are all, like I was just talking to someone in the booth there, these are all building blocks. These are all these experiences are not going to go waste. So what you learned 20 years back, you can still reapply, because it's just the same human mind. And of course we are advancing, but we can use all of that learning, like how AI bots learn, and apply it in today's world.
Yeah, for sure. And Mark, I wanted to ask you something very specific on, when we caught up as a panel just to have a brief discussion around what we wanted to, the various topics, because this topic is huge, right? When we were talking about the challenges, we mentioned, when it comes to companies, reputational risk. So the question for you is, considering the importance of reputation, we saw some of those news articles, how do you approach reducing reputational risk for a business when it comes to testing AI features?
Yeah, that's a good question. So reputational risk, we talked about the hallucination example earlier, where the bot makes up something which isn't true, and that can lead to risk. Another obvious case is the classic bias. So you generate an image with a job title, and it gives you people of a certain gender or race that is potentially embarrassing, or outcomes like that. I think when it comes to testing or risk management in general, it's similar in some ways to security and reliability. Like, you can never get to 100%. That should not be your goal. And with potential bad reputational outcomes, you're not going to get to 0% risk. So it's all about reducing the risk and increasing the test coverage area, rather than trying to guarantee that you're never going to have a bad result. So as I said before, that's partly a business decision, like how important is it to you, how much money do you want to put into it. So in the case of like an internal tool, maybe it doesn't matter that much, maybe you don't need to spend too much time testing it. Whereas if it's your headline feature that you're launching to the world on a stage, you want to have a lot of confidence that it's not going to put something on the screen that embarrasses you. So putting money into it, you really want to be testing as many cases as possible, but also trying to predict what those bad outcomes would be and doing specific testing for those bad outcomes. So I think one of the terms we've got up there is red teaming, which is basically that concept that you try and think of the worst possible outcome that your algorithm might come up with, and then feed it the prompts that you think might get it there. And maybe you do that once or twice and that gives you some confidence. Maybe you do it 1 million times and that gives you a lot of confidence. It's also something that could be outsourced. There's services online where people with the expertise, the experience can work with you to identify what those risks are, test for you, and really try and trick the algorithm or mislead the algorithm to give a result that you don't want. And then every time you make that happen, you can go back to the way it's coded to anticipate and prevent that.
Nice. Yeah, nice. And just going back to when it comes to best practices, I know it's a really hard. It's very hard to pinpoint best practices, I guess, but even techniques, I suppose. What would you guys say are some, perhaps obvious or maybe not so obvious techniques that you've seen that help overcome some pretty common challenges when it comes to testing AI? Robbie?
I'll probably go back to just like basic regression testing as well. Like as Mark said, with red teaming, like if you can have repeatable tests that you need to test, pick out what your cadence is, whether it's weekly or monthly or daily or nightly, whatever, and you can just have them running and have some sort of monitoring of them, as well as red teaming. You could have your like must not fail kind of use cases. So what's your LLM application actually doing? Like, is it a chatbot for, I don't know, a flower shop, or I don't know, something. Let's pick a flower shop. I don't know why, but pick out your use cases. Like, I want to buy flowers, I want to buy roses, or whatever, and make sure they work. And then like free up that time to do more experimental work where you can try and do some additional testing, exploratory testing on top of that.
Nice. Rajesh?
Yeah, I would say the same thing. I mean, I was just going to say more about the exploratory testing at this stage. Yes, back in the days, exploratory testing was not considered that great a deal, but I think especially in the ChatGPT world, I think that's probably one of the techniques that you could start looking at. Ask it, really stupid questions, expecting really, vague answers, and at least you're seeing it for the first time than your customers out there. Yeah.
Mark?
I'd say a data-driven approach. So as much as possible, you want to know your algorithm well enough that you can give it a score or a collection of scoring on the dimensions that you're interested in, or the dimensions that your stakeholders are interested in. And then the algorithm is either getting better over time, it's getting worse over time, it's staying the same. It's something that you can put numbers behind, you can report on those numbers, you can make decisions based on those numbers. So as much as possible, the actual testing you do can be very complicated, very in-depth, very intricate, or very high level, but ultimately you're looking for a numerical score that tells you whether it's good or not, with whatever business rules are behind that judgment.
Oh, nice. Any other comments on that?
I mean, you could go into the whole world of evaluation metrics and benchmarking against other models and all that stuff. I think it's mentioned there, but yeah, like that's some of that's already been done. But like, yeah, having your own benchmarks, like what's a success look like for you, complements those evaluation metrics as well.
It was interesting to see when you put a few examples there. The MMLU, HelloSwag. I think it was MMLU. That's quite it's not brand new. It's not a brand new one. I was quite intrigued to see that it's been around for quite some time. It's quite established, that
Yeah,
particular.
it's quite interesting. If you dig into some of those metrics, I can't remember exactly what they do, but some of them are just, they're just answering like random questions that like a human, like, I don't know, I guess like a human university level knowledge would ask. And it's just a repository of general knowledge questions. I think that's what that one is. One of them is anyway. But it's quite interesting. And that's what, up to now, data scientists have been using to benchmark their models against their previous models. And, you know, so it's a very interesting world. As a QA person, I definitely want to have a more of a look into those data sets. Like you can see them online. There's various places that you can have a look.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a heap more out there than that, but even just having a quick scroll myself, it's very, very interesting. I before this talk, to prepare myself, just to not be completely clueless when it comes to the world of AI, because I am a recruiter, I'm not a software tester. So I did a little course on AI, and it was really insightful. It was very, very insightful. I think it gave me more calm as well when it came to sort of more of the fearful side of AI, and you know, the risks involved, but also what it can do to help our lives and all you know, all of that. And it gave me the basic terminology too. But even sitting down with these guys, it was really awesome to even something as simple as, I mean, we've all heard of LLM, right? Hopefully I'm not alone here. I had never heard of SLM. I hadn't heard of small language model, referred to it like that. So there's just so many terms, and like you guys have pointed out a few times during this talk, it's just constantly evolving. There are new things happening. What can be said today might be history tomorrow, which is, I think, what you said, Raj, right? So it's an amazing thing. And then in terms of our sort of what we want to talk about, just to close us off, I think, is when it comes to, you know, I suppose references and reading material, this isn't just to, you know, send you guys out into the world with this is the exact things and everything that's going to equip you to know everything about testing AI features. It's just some suggestions that our panelists have put together. But in terms of, I'm going to direct it at you guys because I know we're a little bit time poor. We kind of added this in a little bit last minute, this slide. So do you guys have any other suggestions as to some reading materials or some interesting, whether it might not be links or courses, maybe people to follow?
Yeah, so I was a bit cheeky here and put the one at the bottom, which is a link to someone on my team.
Nice.
But she is emerging as an expert internally for what it means to work in quality in a ML-focused team. So, you know, innovating, coming up with new techniques, coming up with ways of measuring success, coming up with ways of enabling the team to go faster. So she's writing, Amruta, she's writing a lot of blog posts on her Medium channel at the moment on what she's learning and what she's doing. And over time, like, there's going to be more coming out, sort of the techniques that we're uncovering that are valuable for us.
I love it. Awesome. Robbie? I know you've added a lot of these though.
Yeah, like I definitely recommend just doing the deep learning .ai courses. There's a bunch of them there. And I was surprised, like there's quite a lot around quality as well, like around testing, LM Ops, which kind of brings the worlds of CI/CD into developing your LLMs as well, which is quite interesting. There's things like, as was mentioned, there's plenty of tools out there and frameworks and stuff. Like LangChain has a thing, I think it's Langsmith, I think, that it helps you with your evaluations as well. The top one there, Confident AI, they have a lot of tools, but they have a lot of information explaining around testing of LLMs as well. So that's a really good resource to have a look at as well. And like Hugging Face has a lot of information there as well.
It's a cute name. Raj, do you have any suggestions?
And not on this topic, but I just want to reverse back to what you said. You're a recruiter, and you didn't probably do much of AI, but I think recruiters are doing the most amount of AI at the moment. And the reason why I'm saying that is because we are we are basically testing a recruitment application for racing job specifications. Now that's AI is going ballistic in that field. And the other one that we are doing is for performance appraisal. So we've all been managers. We've got 10, 15 or 40, 50 odd employees reporting into us, and just imagine you're sitting there year on year trying to appraise. You have to go through a lot of documents. So now you got AI assist actually assisting you to do that. Going through people's documents, learning that, and then suggesting, look, this employee's reading skills are good, communication skills are good. That person has achieved like 70% of his or her KPI, and hence this is what the AI assist thinks. But then the manager has to go in there and review it and then do the pass, add and things like that. So we are spending a lot of time trying to build use cases to make sure that it's moderated correctly. There's a lot of reading material out there. So don't feel left out. That being a recruiter, you are using AI.
True.
I think both of those cases are incredibly risky in some ways, because the bias problem with AI when it comes to recruiting, when it comes to performance management, if the training set has that bias in it when it comes to gender, race, anything else,
absolutely,
like some of those patterns that persist in the industry could become worse if we have too much reliance on AI to repeat the judgments that have been made in the past.
Absolutely. Yep.
I think that's so true. Even just me as a recruiter, I won't name names. I don't want to slander anything or anyone. But there's a tool that us recruiters use quite regularly, and it's a paid tool for recruiters. And it basically they've come out with a new feature fairly recently where if we're trying to search for a candidate on a social media platform, for example, and trying to identify keywords to identify what kind of skills they may have, it's the new way of the searching is using AI, and you plug in a few keywords, and based on that it makes just a ton of assumptions as to what you're looking for. And for me, it may be good for some recruiters if they're recruiting something, I guess, super specific, or maybe if it's, the job titles don't vary a lot. But for me, who only does software testing, the job titles are just, there's so many out there. There's so many variances. There's so many different skills. There's so many different combinations of skills that testers have. I usually find that the suggestions it spits out are just rubbish, because it assumes job titles, and sometimes those job titles don't even have anything to do with testing. When I write performance, for example, it'll just assume some random stuff. I'm definitely starting to see struggles with it already with AI products as a recruiter. Awesome. We have a little bit of time for some questions, I think. So just to throw out to you guys, thank you for listening. I know it's very hard after lunchtime, after a big meal, so we appreciate your attention. But any questions for our panelists? Yes. Hi, Will.
Regarding the testing methodology used in the AI development. So as we know, in the traditional software development, we have the concept of shift-left testing, which means that, so things, the traditional software is deterministic, and so the code is executed line by line. So that when developers develop, so they can have some unit testing, and then integration testing. And then finally, maybe we can have some end-to-end testing for QA to do. But looks like for the AI system, it's slightly different, especially in the world of machine learning. Because if we, for instance, if we want to test an algorithm, a machine learning algorithm, I think what we were talking about is still from the end-to-end perspective. So this algorithm is non-deterministic, and it's all about to maximize the likelihood from the probabilistic perspective. But I think it's a little bit challenging for us to divide the machine learning algorithm so that they are unit testable or integration testable. So in this case, so in the AI development process, how the machine learning engineers can coordinate with QAs to apply a similar shift-left testing methodology in this process? Thanks.
Okay, I'll go first. I think a lot of the shift-left principles definitely apply in the new world. And one assumption to challenge is that you can do unit testing and integration testing. Because as you say, like the results are non-deterministic, you don't know what the results are going to be, so you cannot have a pass-fail test for most of the cases that you're interested in. But what you can do is have tools, techniques, data sets that give you confidence in the algorithm, and then that's what you shift left. So you want the developers writing the algorithm, or the developers that are enhancing the algorithm, to be able to challenge it with those data sets as early as possible. And ideally that's in an automated way, like it's through a pipeline, it's through CI. And with the scoring concept that I mentioned before, like you have a numerical score that is either getting better or getting worse. So that is all steps that you can do as part of the development process and should not be going through the UI as end-to-end testing. It should be done, the developer challenging the algorithm directly. It doesn't matter what the UI is doing at that point.
Just a follow-up question. So do we have a similar, do we have a concept of white box testing in the AI system? Because somehow we're still using the black box testing from the user's perspective to test the algorithms. Do we have some sort of white box testing?
To an extent, but I think by definition almost, when you're dealing with ML, it is a black box. Like you do not know you do not know how the algorithm has been constructed. You cannot investigate its inner workings. So all you can do is see the algorithm as a unit that you challenge and interact with.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think from our perspective, especially when we, the areas that we are looking at kind of elimination process, especially in the moderation side of things. We're not doing too much of, I guess, white box testing. We're doing more black box to ensure that these type of content is not being being displayed and things like that. So we pump it really negative sort of data to make sure that you're not getting those politically incorrect statements and pronouns in different contexts. So yeah, so if you ask me, is it shift left? Probably not, because obviously shift left is more you look at it from a unit perspective, but I think we are still looking at it a very UI functional kind of thing.
I'd just add as well, things like LLM ops is a kind of concept that tries to add structure, that like CI/CD type of structure to deploying LLM systems as well. And part of that, there's lots of tool sets and like Python libraries and stuff that you can automate a lot of this evaluation testing. And it's out there, you can use it. Things like LangChain as well, like if you have a look at that, like there's parts where you can deploy, you do your tests and evaluations, and they have like tools for like dashboards and stuff for looking at the metrics as well. And it just helps, it helps kind of like with the flow of building and deploying an AI model.
Oh, lots of hands. Okay, I think you were first. Krishna.
Thanks for the insights. So can you help us paint pictures 10 years down the line? I'm sure you guys think about it as well. How the testing will happen in future. And we're getting answer from a bot, but I think bot is considering us as bot as well, right? Would there be any human intelligence to that, like the state of mind or which situation you are in when you're asking the question?
I think, if you don't, I just saw one of the previous presentations where someone was talking about an LLM, and definitely there's going to be a human touch to it. So it's going to be a bit of a hybrid model, though it's going to be AI talking to AI, AI testing AI, and all of that. But there has to be that human interface, because AIs are constantly learning as well. So I guess there would be, I think even 10 years or 15, 20 years down the line, there has to be a human interface in there. It's just that we're all going to be probably doing different things. Maybe we're not doing testing and so on, but we might be prepping the data or yeah, like we might evolve into something else, you know. Yeah, our jobs rather, not us as human beings.
Gary.
I was just asking thoughts around, so when we test and we do it in a non-prod environment, and we put data into that environment, and we mess up that data, and then we clear it out, and that data doesn't get into prod. What's your thoughts on like the because you're pumping information into that model as part of testing, have you got potential to then influence that model, or are we having that whole non-prod prod separation of the models?
Like in our example, I'm not sure if I'll be answering to that point, that question, but we've got, you know, test environment and production environment. We throw in a lot of, you know, I guess, negative kind of things into the.
That's what made me think of the question.
Yeah. So and we test it to death, so to speak.
So that negative stuff, does that then influence the model's behaviour?
It does, and it's more of a negative sort of a scenario, which we want to ensure that doesn't happen in production. So exactly like how we did in the non-AI world that's the approach that we're taking. So the machine constantly learns to make sure that yes, it's not spitting it out. But the AI assist also has got that inbuilt. So we are trying to test to make sure that okay, it's not spitting. There's no, you know. It's not falling through the cracks kind of thing. So
No unacceptable answers.
yeah, but you need like I think Mark was suggesting about a data-driven approach. So you need to give it the data to say what is acceptable and what's not, and what's the threshold. So
We're almost training it to say unacceptable things and then turn around and encourage it so that it doesn't do.
yeah, exactly. It doesn't do what it's supposed to do.
I think it's more the feedback. Yeah, the feedback loop is exactly that. You're challenging it to give a bad answer and then teaching it that bad answer is unwanted.
Yeah.
So it's learning over time, but learning in the direction you want it to go in.
But I was also thinking about your comment about it being a black box, right? So why can't we see the inner workings of it like we can with a coded system? Why can't we see why it does this and why it answers that one?
I'm not sure I'm the best person to answer that question in the next 2 minutes. So.
You can if you want, I think, but it's like you need to have a lot of context and probably PhD. You need to figure out. You need to understand all the weights and balances and all that stuff.
It's more that it's infeasible than impossible.
But to answer that question, isn't the training of the AI different to the testing of the AI? And it would be more so if you find errors, can you modify the training? It's the modifying of the training that is offensive as opposed to... And
that modification is done through your internal RAGs. Because obviously it's not the open one. So you're training it constantly, and that's what in your test and dev you're training it. Whereas in prod, just so that it doesn't happen in prod.
But with your red testing, you're not actually training, you're testing negative cases.
Negative cases, correct.
And then it's how you deal with those results.
Yep.
That will end up
In prod,
but that's
correct.
why you can test it again.
Correct.
So I don't think the red testing affects the out or the puts bad data into the system.
It doesn't put bad data into the production system, correct? Yeah, it should. Yeah,
It's how you deal with the
correct.
results that affects it.
We have time for one more question. I saw Anne-Marie. I saw your hand before shoot up, and I saw how disappointed you were when I didn't pick you before.
So I've got a question around prompt engineering, and like we're already being trained how to do prompt engineering, right? So this is how you should ask questions. So I have a question around testing in that at what point do you stop that? Like at what point is the machine training us versus we should be training the machine in terms of the questions we're asking?
Yeah, if I can answer that from my company point of view, we are not expecting our users to do prompt engineering. Like what we want to deliver is a beautiful user experience. Like they do what they want to do and get the results that they want to get. And as I said, like if they don't even know they're using AI, perfect. So expecting your users to understand how to craft the perfect statement to get what they want is a non-starter for my particular product. Whereas when it's more AI is front and center, then learning how to use AI would be the goal. But I think for the general case of consumer software, it shouldn't be an expectation.
Raj or Robbie, do you have any comments to add to that one as well?
Oh, no, I definitely agree.
Yeah,
That's
nice.
it.
Awesome. We've got one more quick thing to do. So I think you probably all know, but at the end of each talk, we have to ask a question to the audience to win a prize. So the question that I'm going to ask the audience related to the talk, can you name one of the challenges that our panelists mentioned when it comes to testing AI features? Oh, fast hand.
Defect management.
Nice. Awesome. Awesome, guys. Thank you so much for your time and attention again, and we hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thank you.